Could not contain my excitement. I started squealing and jumping up and down. The interview was for 8:30 in the morning. For me, that meant 6:30 in the morning. Technically, she wasn't supposed to let me have the room for more than 2 hours, but I tried my ID and it failed. My car broke down, so I didn't have a car. So I turn around and it's a security guard in it to look at it, and then you have 5 minutes to give your response. So had an essay question. I was pretty satisfied with how I did, especially given that this was my first interview. I will tell you, that is because I put in the work. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Olivia and I make videos about college, neuroscience, gymnastics, pre-PA, and everything in between. I'm really excited about today's video because I think it has the potential to help a lot of people and ease some nerves. I had my first physician assistant school interview last month and it was a whole process. And so I just want to make a video about my experience. So some of you might be more familiar with the PA school application process than others, but some schools are rolling admissions, which means they will accept people as they do interviews and kind of will fill spots up as they go throughout the application cycle. Other schools are not and will have a deadline for applications and won't even look at any applications until that deadline hits, then assign interviews after that, then do acceptances all at once. And so the school that I interviewed with is one that does a lot of sections of interviews, if that makes sense. Like they have a timeline and they do interviews throughout the whole timeline. And then once interviews are over, they then decide. So it's not rolling admissions. It's a school I'm really excited about. And so when I got the email that I had an interview, I was alone at the time in my college apartment and I just could not contain my excitement. I started squealing and jumping up and down and it was just so exciting. As soon as one of my other roommates walked in the door, I immediately was like, guess what? I got an interview. I guess another part of the reason that I was so excited is because I kind of went into this application cycle being like, it is okay if I don't get in. This is my first round and so I'm just gonna be confident but also not expect anything and mentally just prep myself for potentially taking a gap year and improving my application. So anyways, to even get an interview, I felt so grateful and really excited. So I got the email that I had an interview about a month or two before the actual interview. And so they gave me a date and a time, and I'm currently in Mountain Time, and the interview was in Eastern Time. So they said the interview was for 8:30 in the morning. For me, that meant 6:30 in the morning is when it would start. I was a little nervous about that. Pretty much everything that went wrong stemmed from the fact that it was at 6:30 in the morning. So my first thing I had to think about was where I was going to do this interview. At the time, I was in a shared room and had 5 other roommates, and so just nervous that if I did it at my apartment that people would listen to me and my answers, or that I would wake someone up at 6:30 in the morning. Just so many other things that could go wrong. We didn't have great Wi-Fi in that apartment, and I did not want to risk anything with this interview. I first wanted to see if there were any buildings on campus at the college I go to because I know they offer a lot of resources, but I soon found out that almost every building on campus doesn't open until 7 a.m. and some even later, and I needed to be in there at the very latest by like 6:15 if the interview started at 6:30. Ideally, I wanted to be there at 6 a.m. or even 5:30. That quickly became a huge obstacle. My campus also has career resources, so I went into that office and I said, hey, I have a really important interview at 6:30 a.m. Is there any way you can accommodate that? I know you technically don't open. And they said, we're so sorry, but no, we can't. Our office doesn't open until 8:30. Cross that off the list. Then I did lots of Googling and tried to see if there was any building on campus that was open earlier than 7 in the morning. I found one, and it's the building that the gym is in and the athletic stuff. That makes sense because the gym is open early in the morning. And so I was like, oh, this is it. I shouldn't have gone this route first, but since I do gymnastics early in the mornings, I just went in the middle of my practice and kind of scoped the building for potential rooms. I found one and I was like, this is a good room. Maybe I'll try doing it in here. But just to be safe and make sure that nobody had it reserved for a random occasion, I looked on the campus scheduling website. Unfortunately, there wasn't a block long enough. This is when I started to get a little nervous. I didn't know what to do. So the website that I looked at to see if that room was reserved was campus scheduling. And so first I called them. Long story short, they said you need to come into the office. The person working at the front desk was so kind because technically she wasn't supposed to let me have the room for more than 2 hours. Eventually found a room on campus and reserved it for me from 6:30 in the morning until 11:30 because they said the interview would run about 3 hours. But we ran into one last obstacle with that. Right as I was walking out of the office, I turned around and I said, hey, just to double check, I know you reserved this room for me at 6:30, but the building it's in, does that open at 6:30? Like, will the front doors be unlocked? And she said, let me look. So she looked on her computer and turns out, no, the building opens at 7. At that point, she had done all that she could to help me and I appreciated it. So I just said, okay, if it comes down to me having to use that, I'll try the doors and see if they're unlocked, but this will be a backup plan. I'll try to find a plan that's more stable. Then I started getting desperate. I asked people around me if they knew of places I could go. Eventually, one of my old roommates said, hey, my family's not living at home right now. There's another family there, but they said they leave the door unlocked if you just want to do it there. We have an office in the basement. Finally, I felt calm and I was like, okay, this will be where I do my interview. That was the plan. Now, fast forward to morning of. I woke up bright and early at about 5 a.m. My first plan was to see if I could get into a room on campus that I had tested before and my ID gave me access to it. I neglected to mention that in the setup, but long story short, about 5:15 after I got dressed and ready, I tried my ID and it failed. And that's when I began to start my panicking just a little bit. I also failed to mention that 2 days prior, my car broke down, so I didn't have a car. So I hurried back to my apartment from campus and woke her up and said, I'm so sorry, but if you could drive me to her apartment, that would be great. I couldn't get into the campus building. She was so nice, she got right up and drove me to my roommate's house. And as I got out, I said, can you just stay in the car till I get in, just in case? And as you can probably tell from the fact that everything went wrong, the doors were not unlocked. And she even gave me the garage code, and the garage opened, but the door inside was locked. So I ran back to the car. I said, sorry, this excursion might take a little bit longer than anticipated. Can you think of anywhere else I could go? She said that her ID card would get me into the library because she worked there. You're not supposed to give your ID to other people to get into places. But I felt desperate, and so I was like, yes, I'll just try that. Hopefully it'll work. She drops me off on campus, gives me her ID, and I walked in and I was like, yes. I had reserved a room on the car ride over, so I just booked it straight to that room. As I was walking really fast, I hear, hey, what are you doing? So I turn around and it's a security guard, and he said, how'd you get in? I said, that door over there. He's like, you're not supposed to be here, and I frantically explained my situation. I said, this is my friend's ID card, I have an interview, it's like a last resort, I just need a place to do it. And he just kind of looked at me for a second and was like, well, you're not allowed to be in here, but there's this room in the back. I'll let you in it. He takes me to the back room, then leaves. And the lights won't turn on in that room. And I was like, are you kidding me? This is crazy. I like tried everything and I'm sure I was just doing something wrong, but I did not have the time to figure it out. This interview is 3 hours long and there's no guarantee that this random room, someone won't walk into it at some point. I was like, okay, it's getting kind of close. I guess I'll try that last resort. The building that the campus scheduler scheduled out for me. Maybe this will be open just by some miracle. I speed walk over. At this point, I'm in my blazer and I'm just sweating. Miraculously, the door's open. I am so happy. I go back to the room that she said she reserved for me. It was a little difficult to find, but once I found it, the door was unlocked like she said it would be. I was like, there's no way. This is awesome. It was a really nice conference room. It was pretty soundproof and I set up my stuff. And that is where I ended up doing my interview. So I know this isn't like a traditional time to have an interview or method, but if you find yourself in this predicament, just always have a plan A, B, C, D, even E sometimes, because you never know what can happen morning of. And I'm so glad that I had lots of different plans because they all failed, and the one that I didn't think would work worked. So I did do one like 5-minute practice question just to like settle down and get speaking to the camera. So now for the actual interview part, probably what you all have been waiting to hear about. This interview was over Zoom. I don't know if I even mentioned that yet. They said it would be about 3 hours and that it would be in the MMI format, which stands for multiple mini interviews. Essentially what that means is that everyone will be in a different breakout room for about 7 minutes. You'll be with a different interviewer in every room. They'll ask you a question and you have about 3 to 5 minutes to give your answer. This varies school to school, but this one I think was they ask you a question, you have a minute to look at it, and then you have 5 minutes to give your response. That's basically what happened. I was asked, I think, 6 different MMI questions. Then after I finished each time, we would swap rooms and then I'd be introduced to a new interviewer. She would show the question, I would answer. It just kind of went like that. They also had an essay question. For that, we were all put in the same room. And there was a proctor watching us. We just pulled up Word and answered the question in an essay format and then emailed the interviewer our response. I was really nervous about the essay part, but it was definitely the most chill out of everything. After we were done with all of that, we got put in a room with the dean of admissions for the school. And we just got to talk with them for about an hour about whatever we wanted to. We asked him questions. He kind of gave a little presentation about the school. Overall, I was pretty satisfied with how I did, especially given that this was my first interview. I will tell you, that is because I put in the work to prepare. I know that some people are more naturally inclined when it comes to interviewing and even just speaking. Some people have a way with words. Some people are really quick on their feet and have experiences that just come to mind. I really admire that, but I'm just not one of those people. I know I put in the work to become a PA and I had experiences, so I wanted to prepare to be able to share what I wanted to say and have an impression ready for them to have of me, if that makes sense. Some people say that preparing for interviews makes it fake. That is not true. You can still do prep work and be genuine in your answers. And especially in this MMI format, you cannot rehearse answers and recite them. They're questions that will always be new and catch you off guard. It's more just practicing speaking and answering those types of questions. I know a lot of you are probably curious what types of questions they asked. I did a lot of mock interviews in the MMI format. I felt pretty comfortable by the end of all my prep. I'll give you a classic example of one of those. You have a 26-year-old male who's a drug addict, and you have an 87-year-old woman who is a really good person, beloved member of the community, and they both need a liver transplant. Which one do you give the liver to? So questions like that, I got really good at answering, going at it from all perspectives and not judging people for personal matters, but keeping it medical, thinking about maximizing utility and things like that. And those are all very situational. The questions I was asked in the interview, I was a little bit caught off guard by them. They were a little bit broader and just asked me to talk about one topic. It didn't end with a question, it just said, discuss this, discuss burnout. That's very general. Obviously there's a lot you can say about burnout, but I was just kind of surprised. Another thing I was surprised about was everyone I talked to before said usually looks bad if you don't fill up all the time. If you're given 5 minutes, find useful things to talk about for the full 5 minutes. After the first couple questions that I answered, I kind of got the feeling that I was talking too much and that they wanted to ask follow-up questions. Take this with a grain of salt. I'm sure not every program is like this. A couple of them were saying, oh wow, our time's up, that was really thorough. That just gave me the impression that maybe I wasn't supposed to talk for the whole 5 minutes. So the next question I talked for maybe 3 minutes and then kind of wrapped up my answer, paused, and then they asked a follow-up question. I was like, oh, maybe I should have been doing that for all the questions. I don't know. Hopefully that didn't hurt me too much, but just be receptive to the person on the other end. How I prepped were those online mock interviews. A lot of those were through my school, so I would ask your school for what resources they offer, especially in terms of MMIs. I also did read a book. I will show a picture of it. It's How to Ace the Physician Assistant Interview. It was pretty helpful, at least in calming my nerves. They didn't have a lot on MMI specifically, but just in general, it made me feel better to read it, so I did. Another resource is YouTube. YouTube is great for having example interviews or having mock questions. The only thing I would say is if you do look up questions, whether it's in a book or on a YouTube video, give your answer right away and like have a timer going, make it like the real deal. That is what will help you be quick on your feet and be able to answer the questions just like you will in the interview instead of waiting and thinking about your answer and stuff like that. I will also say I'm almost scared to put this in here because you do not need to do this. With the book I read, I did write down all the questions they had in it and then jot down a couple notes of what I would give for my response. This was more of like a brainstorming exercise. I did not memorize these answers because you just can't do that for an interview. Another thing I did was I just made a whole list of experiences I had that maybe could relate to something. I didn't assign them to a question, but that way you just have a lot of ideas to pull from. So just having that list will help you start somewhere. If I were to go back, I would probably do more in-person prep. Like I would probably ask my advisor if she would ask me a couple questions. As far as interview day goes, you want to be prepped the day before so that you're not worried about it. As you can see from my story, if I was not prepared before, I would have probably lost it day of. If you're not doing your interview at home, or even if you are, I printed out papers that said interview in progress, please do not enter this time to this time. That just made me feel even more calm. I feel like I could talk about this for so long, but it's already running kind of long. So if there's anything else you want to know about the interview or just about PA prep in general, I would love to answer your questions. Leave them in the comments, and good luck to everyone who is applying this cycle or just wants to be a PA in the future. You can do it. I hope this was helpful in some way, shape, or form. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.